He walked back into the cafe that shattered my life, but this time, he wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was running from the death he engineered for himself, and I inherited the fallout. The aroma of burnt sugar and stale coffee still clings faintly to the memory, a scent I associate only with the dingy little cafe where I first saw him after 3 long, agonizing years. My hands, usually steady when frosting a wedding cake, trembled slightly as I wiped down the stainless steel counter of the daily grind. I owned this place now. It was mine, built stitch by painful stitch from the ruins he left behind. When Liam walked in that Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the door didn't chime. It practically shrieked his arrival. He looked different. Not older, exactly, but polished. The threadbare navy sweater I remembered, the one he claimed was his lucky charm, was gone. In its place was a tailored charcoal coat that probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. His hair, once perpetually tousled, was neatly trimmed, and he moved with the hesitant confidence of a man who had finally achieved success, but perhaps lost something essential along the way. My breath hitched. I froze mid-wipe, the damp cloth suspended in the air between the espresso machine and the pastry display. I hadn't practiced this moment. I'd imagined it 1,000 times, usually in my head, fueled by cheap wine late at night. But in reality, seeing him standing there, bathed in the afternoon sun filtering through the dusty window, was like being hit by a physical wave. "Sarah," he managed, his voice a low rasp that still sent shivers down my spine, though now it sounded brittle, like old glass. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him, cataloging the changes. The faint scar above his left eyebrow, the one he got falling off his bike when we were 19, was still there, a small familiar anchor in a sea of unfamiliarity. But the hunger I remembered in his eyes, the desperate striving energy that fueled our shared impossible dreams, was replaced by something else. A kind of hollowed-out relief, maybe, or perhaps just profound exhaustion. "It's Ms. Hayes now, Liam," I said, the words emerging cooler and sharper than I intended. I put the cloth down, deliberately straightening my apron. "We're closed for specialty orders, but the drip coffee is still on." He didn't move toward the counter. He just stood by the door, clutching a sleek, expensive briefcase as if it were a life raft. I saw the reviews online. This place is thriving. You did it, Sarah. You really did it." "I had to," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "Some of us don't have silver platters handed to us." That hit its mark. I watched the color drain slightly from his face. The silence stretched, thick and awkward, punctuated only by the low, rhythmic hiss of the cooling espresso machine. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, until he was standing where he used to stand every morning, leaning on the counter, planning our future in the steam rising from his mug. "I'm in town for the merger," he finally confessed, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the reclaimed wood tables, the local art on the walls, the simple, honest quality of everything that replaced the cramped, mildew-scented apartment we shared. "The Hawthorne deal. It's huge. I needed a quiet place to think before the closing." "And you thought here was quiet?" I laughed, a short, harsh sound devoid of humor. "You should have checked the local gossip blogs, Liam. I'm hardly anonymous anymore. Turns out being the scorned, brilliant baker is excellent marketing." He winced. "That's not why I came here, Sarah. I came because—" He paused, running a perfectly manicured hand through his perfect hair. "Because I've been thinking about you. A lot. About everything." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms, inviting him to continue his performance. "Save your breath, Liam. What did you need? Directions to the nearest five-star restaurant? I hear the Gilded Spoon is excellent for men trying to impress the heiresses they marry." His jaw tightened. "That's unfair." "Unfair?" I scoffed. "You left me 3 days before our lease was up. You left a note taped to the fridge saying you'd found a better opportunity, a path to true stability that I, apparently, wasn't compatible with. You took the savings, Liam, all of it. Stability looked an awful lot like a down payment on a condo overlooking the bay for you, and eviction papers for me." He looked down at the floor, defeated for a brief moment, and I almost felt a twinge of the old sympathy, the weakness that made me love him so blindly. But then he straightened up, that expensive coat suddenly seeming like armor again. "I needed to succeed, Sarah," he whispered, lifting his eyes. They held a desperate plea I hadn't seen since that night he proposed with a ring box containing nothing but a promise. And I did. I built that life. The houses, the investments, the visibility, it's all real now. But it's empty. I need to tell you something important, something I couldn't even admit to her. He took another step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial level, his desperation finally cracking the polished facade. "The merger, Sarah, it's not just about money anymore. It's about survival. My entire portfolio is leveraged against this deal, and if it collapses, I lose everything. Not just the wealth, but my reputation, my access, everything I left you for." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the confession I'd always dreamed of. The downfall, the universe delivering justice. "And why do I care about your portfolio collapsing?" I challenged him, folding my arms tighter. Liam gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white against the dark wood. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and stale anxiety. "Because, Sarah, the only person who knows the proprietary security loophole in the Hawthorne contract, the one I was supposed to iron out before signing next week, is you, and I desperately need your help to fix it or I'm ruined. And if I'm ruined, I can't go back to her. I can't keep up the pretense, and I realized I never stopped loving you. I need you to save me." His words hung in the air, heavy with the stench of desperation and the ghost of our shared past. I never stopped loving you. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt a strange, almost frightening surge of power. For years, I had been the discarded one, the one scraping by while he soared. Now the architect of my misery was standing here, hat in hand, begging for the one thing he'd thrown away, my unique expertise. I straightened up slowly, forcing a lazy smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You need my help. That's rich, Liam." I walked around the counter, my movements deliberate, putting physical space between us, turning the small cafe into my fortress. "You remember what you said when you left? You said I was too small-minded, too focused on yeast and sugar, not enough on the big picture, that my talents were limited to baking cakes for suburban housewives." He flinched, the memory clearly stinging. "I was an idiot. I was ambitious and terrified, and I made a catastrophic mistake. You're brilliant, Sarah. You always understood complex systems, the chemistry of baking, the logistics of running a business single-handedly. That's why you're the only one who can see this flaw in the contract. It's a specialized vulnerability in the escrow protocols. It requires a mind that thinks laterally, outside the standard financial box. And you think I'm just going to hand over my expertise, my new stability, to the man who dismantled my old one?" I picked up a pastry brush, turning it over in my fingers. It was a weapon in my hand now. What's in it for me, Liam? Besides watching you drown? His eyes widened, pleading. Anything. I'll give you anything. Half the profits from the completed deal, I promise. Or I can make this go away. I can ensure you never have to worry about rent or suppliers or even this cafe again. I can set you up somewhere beautiful, somewhere you always dreamed of, that little place in Tuscany we looked at online. The mention of Tuscany, our impossible dream, was a low blow. It tugged at the foundation of the anger, exposing the fragile core of love that sometimes still flickered beneath the scar tissue. But I held firm. I had built this life without fairy tales, and I wouldn't trade my reality for his promises anymore. Tuscany is lovely this time of year, I said conversationally, walking towards the back office door. But I'm booked solid for the next 6 months. Weddings, corporate catering. I'm booked solid with my success. I reached for the doorknob, signaling the end of this bizarre visitation. Good luck with the Hawthorne merger, Liam. I hope your wife, what's her name again? Bethany? Beatrice? Is very supportive during your impending collapse. He moved with surprising speed, blocking the door before I could pull it open. He pressed his body against the frame, effectively trapping me against the wall of my own office. The space between us shrank instantly, reclaiming the intimacy that had once defined our relationship, now twisted into coercion. "Don't do this, Sarah," he breathed, his voice tight with panic. "You don't understand the kind of people I'm dealing with. If this falls through, I'm not just bankrupt. I'm in danger. Real danger. People who don't send polite notes." My professional facade finally cracked. I saw the raw fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that goes beyond financial ruin, the fear of powerful men he'd clearly crossed in his ruthless ascent. This wasn't just about regaining my affection, it was about survival. A desperate, ugly scramble for self-preservation. "Danger," I echoed, trying to keep my voice even. "You traded my safety, my future for a penthouse view, and now you expect me to risk mine for yours?" "It's not risk if you help me," he insisted, his hand brushing my arm as he gestured emphatically. The contact after all this time felt electric and toxic all at once. "If you fix this, I can walk away clean, disappear back to the life I built, and you never have to see me again. I swear it. I'll wire the money tomorrow. The Tuscan Villa funds plus a substantial bonus. Just look at the contract for me tonight. Please, Sarah." I looked past his shoulder, my eyes catching on the small, framed photograph sitting on my desk. A slightly faded picture of us from college, laughing, carefree, before ambition curdled everything. It was a painful reminder of the man I had loved. I took a deep, slow breath, considering the gravity of his fear. If he was telling the truth about the danger, this wasn't just about getting back at him. This was about choosing sides in a game far bigger than my cafe. "Fine," I conceded, the word tasting like ash. "I'll look at it, but on my terms. I won't be working for you, Liam. I'll be consulting for myself." I pushed past him, heading to my desk, where I kept my secure work laptop tucked away. "You wait here. Don't touch anything. And do not, under any circumstances, try to explain your current marital situation to Mrs. Henderson when she comes in for her 4 p.m. latte." He sagged against the doorframe in relief, a genuine, uncontrolled expression of gratitude washing over his face. "Thank you, Sarah. You saved my life." I powered up the laptop, the screen glowing bright blue in the dim office. I pulled up the encrypted file he'd messaged me moments before walking in. a massive, unwieldy PDF labeled Hawthorne_escrow_final_draft. I scrolled down past pages of dense legal jargon, my specialized mind already starting to map the flow of funds, the logic gates of the security measures. Liam watched me, silent, leaning against the doorframe like a statue waiting for instructions. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the specific paragraph he'd mentioned, buried deep in the indemnification clause regarding digital asset transfer during an unforeseen market downturn. I stopped scrolling. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a loophole. It wasn't a flaw requiring specialized lateral thinking to exploit. It was something far worse. The clause wasn't designed to protect Liam if the deal went south. It was designed to transfer all liability, and more importantly, all existing assets linked to the transaction, to the next single signatory in line if the primary negotiator faced immediate legal incapacitation or death. And as I reread the names listed for succession, my vision blurred. The next signatory wasn't his firm's general counsel or his corporate partner. The clause listed the secondary signatory, the one who automatically inherited the entire leveraged portfolio, as Beatrice Hayes, his current wife. But there was a final contingency, a rarely used safety net, written in fading italicized text at the very bottom of the subsection. In the event of primary signatory incapacitation prior to 11:59 p.m. on the day preceding the closing date, all assets are immediately transferred to the secondary signatory, or failing that to the individual whose prior contractual agreement was directly superseded by the current secondary signatory's agreement. I looked up sharply at Liam, who was still watching me with expectant relief. "Liam," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You said you needed me to fix a flaw in the escrow protocol to save you." He nodded eagerly. "Yes, you see it, right? Tell me how to patch it." "It's not a flaw," I choked out, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "It's a tripwire, and it's not designed to ruin you. It's designed to make you disappear. If this deal collapses tonight, Liam, all your assets don't just go to Beatrice. They go to the last person you broke a contract with, the one whose original agreement you invalidated to make way for hers." He blinked, confusion warring with dawning horror on his face. "What are you talking about? That clause is standard indemnity." "No, it's not," I interrupted, my voice rising with sudden, terrifying certainty. "It's archaic. It's from the 1950s, only used in hostile takeovers when the primary negotiator is expected to be removed. Liam, someone didn't just build a risk into this deal for you to avoid. Someone planned for you to fail tonight. And if you fail tonight, I inherit everything you own." Just then, the cafe door didn't just chime. The glass shattered inward with the sound of a gunshot, and 2 massive men in black tactical gear stepped over the wreckage, their eyes already fixed on the man trapped by the door to my office. One of them leveled a silenced pistol directly at Liam's chest. "Mr. Davies," a voice boomed, cold and utterly devoid of negotiation. "The deadline passed 5 minutes ago. We'll be taking possession of the assets now." The sound of the shattering glass ripped through the quiet cafe, instantly replacing the gentle hiss of the espresso machine with the deafening roar of impending violence. In the split second before my brain could process the sight of the tactical gear and the chilling finality of the silenced weapon, every instinct honed by years of fending for myself screamed at me to duck. I dove sideways, knocking my chair over, scrambling behind the heavy steel base of the pastry display case, pulling the laptop screen down with me. Liam, frozen by the doorframe, finally snapped out of his stunned compliance. He didn't run toward the exit. He threw his expensive briefcase, the armor he arrived in, at the nearest enforcer, a desperate theatrical gesture of futility. "Wait!" Liam roared, scrambling backward toward my office, toward me. "The transfer hasn't been finalized. Sarah has the counter agreement. She's the key." The second man, reacting with brutal efficiency, ignored the briefcase and kicked the door frame where Liam had just been standing, splintering the wood. The first man, the one holding the gun, didn't even flinch at Liam's shout. He focused entirely on the source of the threat, the person who now held the key to Liam's entire empire, me. "Stay out of this, Baker," the man with the gun growled, his voice muffled by the tactical mask, yet dripping with authority. He took 2 heavy steps toward my hiding spot. I clutched the laptop tighter, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just corporate sabotage, this was professional termination, and I was suddenly, terrifyingly caught in the crossfire. I had been looking for a flaw to exploit for my advantage, but instead I had stumbled into someone else's highly elaborate, lethal trap designed for Liam. And now, because I was the only other person aware of the obscure, ticking clock in that contract, I was a liability. "I don't know what you're talking about," I shouted back, trying to sound as ignorant as possible. "I just sell muffins here. I don't know this man." Liam, seeing his last hope evaporate, made a catastrophic error. He grabbed my arm, pulling me out from behind the display case, shoving me slightly in front of him. "She does know. She analyzed the documents. Sarah, tell them about the succession clause. Tell them you're the beneficiary." The gun tracking Liam instantly swiveled to point directly at my face. "Beneficiary?" the enforcer repeated, his voice laced with icy amusement. "Well, well, karma works fast in this city, doesn't it, Davies?" The pressure on my arm was excruciating as Liam squeezed, urging me to confess, to beg, to use the leverage I suddenly possessed. But Liam had miscalculated. In that moment, I saw not the man I loved, but the self-serving opportunist who had always used people until they broke. He was willing to sacrifice me, again, to buy himself an extra 30 seconds. My anger surged, cold and pure, instantly overriding the terror. I wouldn't be his shield, his pawn, or his final sacrifice. With a sharp, trained movement I didn't know I possessed, learned from years of wrestling heavy industrial mixers, I yanked my arm free, pivoting hard. I brought the edge of the heavy laptop crashing down in a desperate arc, not at the gunman, but directly into Liam's exposed temple. The sickening thud echoed louder than the gunshot had felt. Liam's eyes rolled back, his grip slackened, and he crumpled like a discarded coat onto the floor beside the broken door. The 2 enforcers paused, momentarily thrown off balance by the sudden, unexpected internal conflict. "He's down," the leader reported into his headset, clearly confused by the victim turning on the victimizer. "Secondary individual engaged the primary. He's unconscious." I didn't wait for them to regroup. While they were processing Liam's sudden, self-inflicted unconsciousness, I bolted. I didn't run for the front door. They were blocking the only clear exit. I sprinted toward the back of the cafe, toward the narrow, grimy service alley I used for deliveries. "Stop her," the leader barked, finally moving. I yanked open the back door and plunged into the harsh afternoon light of the alley, adrenaline flooding my system. I could hear heavy boots pounding on the tile floor behind me. The alley was a dead end, ending abruptly at a 10-foot brick wall topped with razor wire. I skidded to a halt, trapped between my only escape route and the approaching men. I looked frantically around the small space. There was a stack of empty, greasy cooking oil drums and a rusting metal ladder leading up to the second-story fire escape of the adjacent tenement building. It was old, rickety, and probably illegal, but it was my only shot. I scrambled onto the oil drums, my worn cafe boots slipping slightly on the slick metal, and lunged for the lowest rung of the fire escape. I grabbed hold, ignoring the screech of rusted metal protesting my weight, and started climbing with desperate speed. The first enforcer rounded the corner just as my feet left the ground. He raised his weapon again, aiming for my legs. Crack, crack. 2 suppressed shots hit the metal rungs just beneath my boots, showering me with sparks and shrapnel of aged metal. I shrieked, kicking higher, hauling myself onto the relative safety of the landing platform just as the second man appeared below. I leaned over the railing, panting, watching them below. They couldn't shoot me without risking exposure to the street, and they couldn't climb fast enough to catch me. "You're not getting away with this, Baker," the leader yelled up, his masked face radiating pure frustration. "We know who you are. We know where you live. And we know that dead idiot just signed over a fortune to you." I backed away from the railing, my heart hammering against my ribs, realizing the horrible truth. I hadn't just saved myself. I had inherited a war. I was rich, powerful, and now marked for death by men who clearly played for keeps. I reached the door to the tenement building, locked, of course, and started pounding on it uselessly, desperate for refuge. Then, from a window directly above the fire escape landing, a different sound cut through the chaos. A small, high-pitched voice. "Are you in trouble, miss?" a child's voice asked timidly. I looked up. A small, curious face, maybe 7 years old, peered down at me from a darkened window, holding a very large, very old-fashioned brass telescope pointed right at me. "Yes, very much so," I gasped, turning back to the door. "Please, can you unlock this? I need to get inside." The child hesitated, looking past me toward the commotion below. Then the small voice came again, laced not with fear, but with strange, unsettling certainty. "Mommy said, if anyone is running from men with big guns, we aren't supposed to help them. She said they're usually running from something worse. And she told me," the child paused, and the telescope lowered just enough so that the child's dark, knowing eyes met mine. "She said if you're the one they want, you should probably just stay right where you are, because the real owner of the contract is already waiting inside." The child's words, delivered with the detached gravity only a small child can muster, hit me harder than the gunfire. The real owner of the contract is already waiting inside. My gaze snapped back to the locked, grimy door, then up to the child holding the brass telescope like a scepter. My inheritance wasn't just money. It was a dangerous, deeply entrenched secret woven into the fabric of Liam's downfall. Someone clearly connected enough to dispatch professional mercenaries on a Tuesday afternoon, had orchestrated this entire disaster, setting Liam up to fail and me up to collect. The mercenaries below were already regrouping. The leader was pointing at the structural weakness of the old fire escape, clearly calculating the risk versus reward of climbing. "We're coming up, Baker!" the man shouted, spitting the title like a curse. I had seconds. If I stayed on the fire escape, I was a stationary target. If I broke into that apartment, I was walking directly into the trap someone else had laid for me. I turned back to the door, ignoring the child's warning, driven by the primal need to escape the barrels pointing at my back. I kicked the door hard, once, twice, putting every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength into the blow. The old lock finally groaned in protest, and the door swung inward with a rasp, revealing a dark, narrow hallway smelling overwhelmingly of boiled cabbage and industrial cleaner. "Thank you," I gasped, stumbling inside and slamming the door shut, fumbling desperately for the deadbolt. The bolt slid home with a heavy, satisfying thunk. For a moment there was blessed silence, broken only by my ragged breathing and the dull thudding of the men outside testing the strength of the door. "It won't hold long," I hissed toward the ceiling, addressing the child above. "Is there another way out of this building?" The child didn't answer immediately. Instead, a new sound emerged from the darkness of the hallway, a soft, rhythmic tapping, growing steadily louder. It wasn't the sound of the mercenaries forcing the door. This was softer, deliberate, like someone walking slowly with a cane. I pressed my back against the bolted door, peering down the cavernous, dimly lit corridor. The tapping led to a single door midway down the hall, slightly ajar, emitting a sliver of sickly yellow light. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound authoritative, though my voice cracked on the last word. The tapping stopped. The sliver of light seemed to widen fractionally. "The real owner," a voice replied. It wasn't the cold, professional tone of the enforcers, nor the frantic plea of Liam. This voice was warm, cultured, almost grandmotherly, yet underscored by an ironclad authority that chilled me to the bone. "Come in, dear. You look like you need an explanation, and I have one for you. I've been expecting you since Liam signed that dreadful prenuptial agreement 5 years ago." The mercenaries outside had finally found a tool. I heard the unmistakable screech of metal, sawing against metal against the outer door. They were cutting through the lock. I stared at the half-open door bathed in yellow light. The child above had warned me that the owner was waiting inside. This had to be her. Liam's downfall was clearly a carefully cultivated, long-term revenge plot, and I was merely the intended recipient of the spoils. If I stayed, I was captured by the thugs hired to clean up Liam's mess. If I went into that room, I was walking straight into the arms of the master puppeteer, who controlled the entire conspiracy. The sound of the bolt on the outer door finally screaming in defeat echoed down the hallway. The heavy door shuddered inwards, revealing the imposing silhouette of the enforcer leader, weapon raised. "Stop right there, Baker," he commanded, stepping into the dim hall. My choice was instantaneous: surrender to the thugs or confront the mastermind. I threw myself away from the entrance, sprinting down the narrow hallway toward the sliver of yellow light, toward the soft, waiting voice, just as the enforcer fired his first, warning shot down the corridor, the sound deafening in the cramped space. I burst through the half-open door and slammed it shut just as the bullet whizzed past where my head had been moments before. I didn't bother with the lock this time. I spun around, gasping for air, expecting to face a formidable crime boss, perhaps a terrifying matriarch of some shadowy financial organization. But the room wasn't an office or a command center. It was a meticulously kept, surprisingly luxurious parlor, and sitting in a high-backed velvet armchair, calmly sipping tea from a delicate china cup, wasn't a woman in her 60s, but a stunningly beautiful woman in her late 30s, draped in silk, with eyes the exact unmistakable shade of hazel as Liam's. She set her teacup down without spilling a drop, offering me a serene, pitying smile. "Welcome to the final stage, Sarah," she said, gesturing toward a heavy, locked antique safe built into the wall behind her. "Liam's wife, Beatrice, is lovely, but she was never the right instrument for the job. I needed someone stronger to inherit. I needed someone Liam had already tried to destroy. You see, I'm his mother, and I've been waiting 20 years for him to finally fail this spectacularly. Now, since you're here, perhaps you can do something for me. That safe contains the hard drives detailing every single one of his illicit transactions. Help me open it and we can bury him together. The revelation hung in the air like smoke from the fired weapon. Liam's frantic, desperate plea had not been a mistake. It had been an unwitting delivery service. I wasn't the accidental beneficiary of a corporate security glitch. I was the target of a meticulous, matriarchal campaign of revenge. The woman in silk, Liam's mother, exuded an icy control that made the mercenaries outside seem like clumsy amateurs. "You set me up," I stated flatly, wiping sweat from my forehead. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving behind a chilling clarity. "You engineered my entire downfall with Liam so that when he broke his contract with her, the inheritance would default to me." She smiled, a slow, genuine expression of satisfaction. "My dear, I merely accelerated fate. Liam was always destined to fail. He inherited my ambition but lacked my patience. Beatrice was a useful pawn to legally secure the initial assets, but she lacks the necessary killer instinct. You, on the other hand," she leaned forward, her hazel eyes locking onto mine, "you built an empire from rubble. That takes tenacity. I need someone who understands structural integrity to dismantle his entire criminal enterprise from the inside out." Outside, the pounding intensified. The mercenaries were clearly gaining leverage on the weak hallway door. "And what if I refuse?" I challenged, looking at the heavy, antique safe. It had a combination lock, old and imposing. "Then," she said calmly, gesturing toward the bolted door separating us from the approaching violence, "you and I will share the same fate when those men breach the lock. They won't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. My son failed, Sarah. Do you want to fail now, too, by being associated with his mess?" The choice was stark. Die with the man who betrayed me, or ally with the woman who hated him more than I ever could. For years, my motivation had been survival and vengeance. Now, the stakes were higher. If this woman was right, opening that safe meant obtaining the proof needed to utterly destroy Liam's reputation and silence the men outside, ensuring my own safety. "The combination," I demanded, stepping toward the safe. "What is it?" "It's based on the date he proposed to Beatrice," she purred, clearly relishing the final turn of the screw. "The day he cemented his betrayal of you. You know it better than I do." I closed my eyes, filtering out the noise of the breaking door. The proposal wasn't in Tuscany. It was a hastily arranged dinner at a downtown bistro, a week after he'd taken the initial investment money. I remembered the reservation confirmation email, the obnoxious, loud music, the cheap champagne. "October 24th, I whispered. 2410. She nodded approval. "Try the year he was born. He always loved making a show of his sentimental dates." My hands, though still shaking slightly, moved to the dial. 2, 4, 1, 0. And then the year he always boasted about turning 21, the year he felt he became a man, 2005. Click, clack, whir. The tumblers aligned perfectly. The heavy metal door swung inward silently, revealing not stacks of cash or jewels, but rows of antique-looking hard drives, blinking with tiny, incriminating green lights. "Take them all," the mother commanded, her voice suddenly urgent. "And get out. There's a service elevator on the far side of this floor. It leads to the loading dock, completely clear of these thugs. Just as I reached for the first drive, the door to the parlor exploded inward. The leader of the mercenaries stood there, breathing heavily, his weapon steady. He took in the scene: the broken door, the elegant woman, the open safe, and me standing poised to take the evidence. "Well played, Mrs. Davies," the enforcer said, his voice losing its composure, laced now with true panic. "But the transfer is conditional on the primary signatory's survival until midnight. If he's injured, the assets transfer to the secondary. If the secondary is compromised, the assets revert to the final signatory. We were hired to protect the assets, not to collect them." He glanced at the mother, then at me, calculating. He hadn't been sent to kill Liam. He'd been sent to guard the transfer process until midnight, ensuring the assets landed safely with Beatrice. My involvement and Liam's sudden collapse had thrown the entire timeline into chaos. "You're not inheriting anything, Baker," the enforcer spat, shifting his aim from the mother to me, the immediate threat. "The deal is void if the secondary party aids in the extraction of evidence." "Wrong," the mother cut in smoothly, standing up, her silk gown flowing around her. She took one confident step toward the mercenary, holding up a small diamond-encrusted phone. "Because I didn't rely on Liam's contract succession for my primary interest. I relied on this." She tapped the screen of the phone. A loud, unmistakable sound echoed through the room, the dial tone of an outgoing call. "I called the authorities the moment Liam walked into that cafe," she announced calmly. "I reported an armed robbery in progress, naming you as the perpetrator attempting to coerce a witness into theft." The enforcer looked utterly blindsided. Before he could react, the wail of approaching sirens, far louder and more official than any private security detail, screamed from the street below. "Go!" The mother shoved me toward the back of the parlor. "Take the drives. The elevator is behind that tapestry." I didn't hesitate this time. I grabbed two of the hardest-looking drives, tucking them securely into the waistband of my apron, and bolted toward the heavy tapestry she indicated. I yanked it aside, revealing a small industrial steel door marked "Service Access Only." As I fumbled with the latch, I heard the enforcer yell something incoherent and the sound of a struggle beginning behind me. A heavy blow, a cry of surprise from the mother, and the distinct sound of breaking china. I threw the service door open and plunged down the metal stairs of the service elevator, just as the main sirens arrived, drowning out all other noise. I slammed the button for the ground floor and watched the indicator lights drop, praying I was fast enough. The elevator shuddered violently as it descended, the metal groan echoing the chaos I had just escaped. When the doors finally hissed open onto the loading dock, it was empty and dark. I stumbled out, clutching the hard drives like newborn treasures, already formulating the plan, the data, the proof, the total destruction of the empire Liam thought he had built. I took 3 steps toward the open street when my phone, which I'd forgotten I'd even brought, buzzed violently in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. It was a picture, a grainy black and white photo taken from the angle of the ceiling in the parlor. It showed the mother pinned against the wall by the enforcer, his gun pressed against her temple, the silk gown askew. The caption beneath the photo read, "Tell me what you did with the other drives, Sarah, or your new inheritance comes with an expiry date."